Okay, well, I'm going to get started as usual, expecting probably several dozen or a dozen more people to trickle in over the next couple minutes. If you're new to this series, welcome. A big warm welcome to Stanford and our Wildland Fire seminar series looking at policy and research solutions in this critically important area of interest. I'd like to acknowledge again the Bill Lane Center, Stanford Woods Institute, as well as Stanford Sustainability Data Science for supporting this seminar series. And it's time for me to really ramp up promotion here. We have our Big Earth Hackathon Wildland Fire Challenge coming up during spring quarter. If you're a student, please consider signing up and participating. If you're a staff or faculty or even an outsider interested in innovative solutions, contact me. We'd love more project ideas for the students to consider. But as a great segue into what the Wildland Fire Challenge is all about, I am so pleased to have our two speakers today, Bear and Tule Horton, who did a remarkable job as part of the Wildland Fire Challenge last year. Worked on a project that I would say is classically non-traditional for a hackathon perspective, but blew away the judges and what they did. And there was a lot of great projects last year, and they're going to share on an innovative project that they worked on and continuing to work on today, related to NFTs and land management and stewardship and equity and working with indigenous folks. I think you will be really inspired by the work they have done. So we have two speakers today. Bear, he is a non-native born and raised in the foothills above Golden, Colorado. He loves understanding what makes forest ecosystems resilient, and he's grateful to have learned from lived experience of the Karuk tribe through the Understory Collective project, what he's going to talk about today. Studies sustainability and computer science and hopes to integrate community-based solutions in combating the climate crisis. His colleague Tule Horton is a non-native student from San Francisco, California. She feels so lucky to have grown up among the beautiful forests, mountains, and beaches of Northern California, and she's eager to apply her time and learning in service of these ecosystems. Tule is particularly excited by the spiritual and cultural aspects of land stewardship and feels honored to be doing this project with members of the Karuk Department of Natural Resources who are doing such thoughtful, impactful, and empowering work. Tule studies civil and environmental engineering. Again, I can't be more honored and pleased to have and Tule here today to just share what they've done. And I hope you'll be inspired and feel free to ask questions along the way, I guess. Is that okay, and Tule? So interrupt either vocally, raising your hand, chat box, I will monitor. I hope you'll be inspired by what they've done today, and you can see what's possible in this huge landscape of need in the space of wildfire. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over the reins to our two wonderful students who I'm proud to have gotten to know over the past year.
Awesome. Hi, y'all. I can go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Giving you a little sneak peek. Whoops. Cool.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, Derek, and thank you to the Bill Lane Center for having us. I think it's incredible to be at this point a year later after taking the Wildland Fire Hackathon course and really having an opportunity to workshop some of these ideas. And it's been kind of this living, breathing project that Tule and I have been lucky enough to continue to work together on. But before we get started even further, I want to introduce one more team member who couldn't be here today. Tule, if you can head to the next slide, I just want to take a moment to honor Sam, who's on the right-hand side here. Sam joined us for the last push of this event, really making sure that I think, like, as Tule and I, given our positionality of being non-native, in a space where really turning towards and orienting towards Indigenous leadership is important, we wanted to take on a big listening role. And so as our event took shape on campus in a more vocal way, Sam was crucial. She's a member of the Pueblo Isleta tribe in New Mexico and happened to help us with a lot of the messaging and packaging of the project, but also just like developing really strong ties with the Native community on campus. So we're really lucky to have her. She couldn't make it today, but just wanted to really honor how much she'd poured into the project as well. And now I'll turn it over to Tule.
Awesome. So here's just a bit overview of what we're going to talk about today. We'll kind of discuss the genesis of this project, the problem statement that kind of grew into something, much different and maybe a little less traditional, how our partnership with the Karuk tribe, and specifically the Department of Natural Resources, became kind of the centerpiece of this project, and then kind of how it turned out, even just going back a few weeks to our launch event that was on Friday the 3rd. So to get started, the genesis of this project goes all the way back to last winter. Eric and I, along with 3 other team members, were taking a class called Hacking for Climate, and we worked on this problem statement of the wildfire crisis in the West, which if you're in the seminar, I'm sure you're well familiar with. It's a really sticky problem. It's important. It's a matter of health, safety, climate, ecosystems, culture. It touches really every important issue facing society right now. And yet the paths forward are murky. There's lots of barriers. It implicates politics and culture and resource deployment and all the things that make a problem slow and difficult. So we went about conducting about 100 interviews with stakeholders across California and the West more broadly, who are intimately connected with the wildfire crisis. That meant we talked to tribal leaders, we talked to members of CAL FIRE, we talked to property owners who were concerned about their fire insurance, we talked to fire insurance providers, really the whole gamut, and kind of landed on this central nugget of truth that 20 million acres of land across California need stewardship, need to be burned. Healthy fire and prescribed fire is a part of the California ecosystem, and healthy fire is good. And that tribal leadership has and continues to exemplify this good fire culture. And it's a wisdom that isn't being embraced at the full extent that it can be and should be. So we were asking ourselves as 5 Stanford students in this class devoted towards addressing the wildfire crisis, how can we advance that goal and serve tribal leaders such as folks at the Karuk Department of Natural Resources who are doing this work on the ground? So just to kind of contextualize this, if you haven't come across this in class, and honestly feel free to jump in if I'm being redundant, but a prescribed burn is a burn that you intentionally set in the understory of a forest, so overgrown shrub and grass and low-hanging trees, fallen branches, all that stuff that maybe makes it difficult to walk through a forest. Prescribed burn intentionally and thoughtfully clear the understory, timing it with the wind, the weather, the climate conditions. And it really requires an intimate knowledge of the ecosystem to know when is this fire, where should it be, and at what time should it be lit. This is a practice, much like cultural burning, that has existed in California since time immemorial. Native tribes have been burning California landscapes regularly, since time immemorial, and California has an ecosystem that not only tolerates but promotes fire. A lot of the plants throughout California are adapted to thrive in fire conditions, specifically this low height, low temperature fire. So up in the north on the Klamath, where the Karuk tribe is, things like the hazelnuts, they'll actually germinate and open and become a culturally available resource in the conditions of a cultural burn. The grass that's so important for basket weaving too will thrive when prescribed fire is on the landscape. Down in Central and South California, like the chaparral has fire promoting oils on the leaves that actually allow fire to pass through these ecosystems, outcompete other plants, and allow these native species to germinate. So this practice is not only an important part of a healthy California ecosystem, but then and now, but it's something that unfortunately colonialism and Western expansion and kind of the presence of the California government has suppressed in a way of suppressing native culture. Intentional fire was deemed dangerous and outlawed in the late 1800s. And we're in this moment of reckoning, okay, our policy has been oppressive to this practice, and yet it's so necessary. And how can we bring it back onto the land, not only as a ecological revitalization, but a cultural revitalization? And I'll just say one last thing, because I'm realizing I'm kind of dragging on, but it's important to focus on this intersection and realize that like fire is culture, fire is medicine, fire is a healthy ecosystem. And when we look at a forest, I think there's kind of, in climate conversations, we can have this idea of like, people are bad, you know, get people off these native ecosystems, they're tramping all over it or whatever. And actually, like, a healthy forest is one that has its stewards on it all the time, lighting these fires, taking care of it. People and forests are codependent, and fire is kind of that point of relationship, and it can be a really beautiful thing. So Eric and I in our launch event shared this video that's pretty cool. It's 7 minutes. This event, as you'll hear about, was all about really platforming Indigenous voices and leadership. And so we wanted to do that today as well. I might actually have to stop my share and reshare. I'm not the techiest, so let's see if I can get it over to the video. Cool. Okay. And I'm gonna start playing it, and just let me know if someone come on if you can't hear sound. Eric, will you give me a thumbs up if you can hear that? There should be drumming.
Can't hear it. If you're
can't
able
hear it.
to maybe
Okay.
share audio right before sharing screen, that might get it.
Okay, let me try one more time. Share. Where's the share audio button?
So in the share options, when you're saying share screen, then there's like a little checkbox to say share computer audio alongside it.
Oh, nice. Share sound. Awesome. Sorry, guys. Clearly don't do this. Oh goodness. Okay. Can you hear that, Eric?
Unfortunately,
oh, really?
no.
Oh, shoot. That's weird. Okay, let's try.
Yeah, there should have been a checkbox, as Eric notes, right when you're
Yeah,
trying to share.
I have that clicked, share sound. So that's okay. Now there's like a little.
In a sustainable way.
Great.
That
Not good?
knowledge
Okay.
was handed down orally.
Awesome.
Tribes have thousands of years of experience adapting to climate change and living with their environment in a sustainable way.
That knowledge was handed down orally by our ancestors to their children to teach their children how to survive in this country.
A lot of young people don't realize all the knowledge that they already have, being raised in these places and just, living here and doing the practices that our ancestors have passed down to us.
Oftentimes, tribal people are not paying attention to what's going on in the outside world and all this hair on fire reaction to the climate crisis. But in fact, those very tribal people, by living their daily lives, are actually doing their part to adapt to it and to respond to it.
We have to use our present tools and present knowledge to get back to some past practices that we want to get back to safely without destroying everything, because catastrophic wildfire is no good for anything really. It took 100 years to totally wreck up our forest, and it's going to take at least that much to get back to something more diverse and fire resilient.
Climate change is pretty daunting. At the same time, it's really important to know there's a lot of things that people can do. Native people have been talking about all of these issues for a long time, and this is actually really just on a continuum of the struggles that people have had and been the fights that people have been fighting for a very long time.
The connection with nature is how we was able to survive and thrive back in the day before contact. When you rehabilitate our connection as Native people back to the environment, things become so much better. When our forests are healthy, our people are healthy.
The next generation that's coming up, they're going to be the ones that They grew up with their ceremonies, they grew up with their language, they grew up with having more control over their lands and stuff, and they're gonna be the ones that have to bring it to the rest of the world. The world needs what we still have, that we fought really hard to keep.
With colonization and regulations, those things weren't allowing people to brush the way they want to, burn the way they want to, gather the way they want to. The ability to go to your places and manage or pray or gather and do the things that as a tribal family have been doing for a long time. Through these years and these processes of colonization, a lot of that was taken away.
Our forests have been really suppressed of fire. The use of fire us Native Indigenous people have always used since time immemorial. And that was disrupted. We put fire in the landscape to help everything around us, not just us, but the wildlife, the plants, and everything within. It's a web of living.
And, the federal government has, many, many years ago, banned specific ceremonial practices of our people. And specifically, they've banned those parts of the ceremony that involved igniting fire on the landscape.
Fire suppression was very enforced. The Native people had a target on their back. Money was put out for bounty to, kill natives. And because of that, for hundreds of years, our forest has been lacking fire. And with that, a majority of our forest right now is, not looking so healthy. It's very dense. A lot of invasive species and a lot of understory, a lot of fuel buildup. If there's no forest around us, how are we going to teach our children to manage these resources, let alone eat or use these resources? If there's no fish in the river, how are you going to teach the next generations below how to fish, how to be purposeful? I think every human being needs to feel some kind of purpose, contribution to life. And if you don't have that feeling, man or woman, to contribute to next generations, then that kind of ties back into their mental health. I want my people to feel healthy, to feel happy, the simple things in life.
The most impactful thing on our land and on our environment and on our plant animal relatives is that missing component of Karuk people being able to use these places, because that's what kept everything in balance. More important than the return of fire is the return of Karuk people to their places and to the decision-making tables about how this land is used and managed and cared for.
The current wildfire situation that is sort of all-consuming, it is a huge threat to tribal sovereignty. We need to go back to what works. And what works is what has worked in this place for thousands of years. The use of fire as the primary management tool. Fire is our medicine.
Connecting fire back to this place, connecting it to the hazel that's there, connecting it to the artifacts that are there, connecting it to the rocks and the histories that might be there.
Our connection with nature is so undescribable through English that you can't really understand it or fathom what's going on with that connection until you experience it. And so once we got a healthy forest out here, we can then try to connect that to the social well-being. And that comes with the resources that come out of it, our diets. And so if we have these resources with these healthy forests, then, it's like kind of a trickle effect. You've got a healthy body, you're gonna have a healthy mind, Socially, physically, and mentally, and spiritually, all have a connection.
Just remembering all those generations that have come before us and all the things that they've had to deal with, it's heavy, heavy stuff. And we are a result of that strength and a result of that resiliency. And, I think we're going to be okay. But, that's because of the work that we're all doing right now. So, yeah.
Suenik Yanchip, Wekwara Yamach, Kukupa Inatihesh, Wekwara Puran, Huski Gatihesh.
All right, thank you everyone for listening to that. Hopefully that was, you all learned something. I'm gonna reshare back to the slide and turn it over to Eric.
So at this point, I think it's important for me to just iterate one more time that like what we're about to describe, our project, it is really I appear to be frozen potentially. Okay, now I'm back. Okay. Our project underwent a lot of transformations, especially in the spring when we were working on it during the Wildland Fire Hackathon. But what we're about to share is kind of the product of a lot of partnership work and really putting out feelers to see, like, does this make sense for all of the involved stakeholders? At the center of that is our partnership with the Karuk tribe, but there's more than just that. I think what we're about to describe is how like both art and stewardship are at the core, but layers around include the Native community here at Stanford and allies who are aspiring to learn more. So with that, we'll dive into a little bit of the technical know-how. Julie, if you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and also if it's okay, I'll just add, I realized maybe from someone just learning about this project, it might seem random that we partnered with the Creek tribe because that they're up on the Klamath River and Stanford's on Muwekma lands, which also had fire practices. And we partnered with the Creek tribe because like realistically, we just were able to reach them and we had a lot of conversations with them in our call and we had this really great partnership that felt mutually beneficial and they expressed interest in. So that's kind of how it evolved. But I think it's important just to note that there are other tribes where Stanford is and in the larger Bay Area that also had prescribed fire or cultural burning practices. Oops, there you go.
So as we were sifting through a few of the pain points that we were sitting with, especially in the winter of last year, well, we were looking at education, needing to amplify the fire professional workforce, needing to look into any ways that you can put resources behind those who already know how to burn. And one of those like levers or fulcrums for change that we thought had not really been tapped into is this idea of NFTs. Since we live in the Bay Area, it feels as though maybe our positionality as Stanford students and living in a very tech-centric spot, it might be something that, yeah, like let's see if we can build a bridge between communities that know what they're doing and trust that the work will get done, but find a way to put further support behind it. So just a little like crash course on NFTs, and I'm happy to also pause for any questions you might have. This kind of comes from my computer science background, but Julie and I were exploring this for the first time last year and had a lot of questions too. So an NFT or a non-fungible token, you can think of it as a digital art token stored on a digital ledger. The ledger is known as the blockchain, but an idea behind this is that it's guaranteed to be unique. So if I had a digital copy of the Mona Lisa, I know that that's certified to be true because of this ledger. A lot of value is derived from the idea of like scarcity and guaranteed uniqueness, because this ledger indicates that the NFT is not a copy or a duplicate of any kind. There's some of the value. With this, we think the scope of what we're working with could expand because there's around like an estimated 75 million users on blockchain technologies, and this is across different marketplaces. Throughout our project research, we also looked into similar projects. A few are featured here on the top two pictures. You have both Rewilder and Amazon Moss, which are two NFT projects looking to showcase stewardship projects, returning health to an ecosystem, or monitoring a specific set of hectares along the Amazon River. But we really feel as though there was like one gap that our project sought to tackle in particular, and this is the idea that there is no NFT project that's directly tied to story and partnership. And this is tricky because you're taking a digital platform and marketplace that is expansive with its reach. But a core tenet of how Tuli and I wanted to operate with our partnership is really saying, let's start simple. Our pilot project and really the biggest part of our project was just centering things around the Karuk tribe. So with that, we can maybe head to the next slide, but if there are any questions on NFTs now might be a good time to ask. Okay, well, with that, I think we can dive a little into the design of our solution, so to speak. This is about as close to a scientific methodology as we'll get, but really it's a bit more of a soft science. To carry out one of these collaborative partnerships, I think that it's important to know that we're moving at the speed of trust is kind of a phrase that a mentor of mine shared with me. And I really appreciated that because we had many incremental check-in calls to see that our tribal partners and our partnering artists were all on the same page, and that what we were doing on our end actually made sense for what they value and what they're looking to do. So as Julie mentioned, we're working with the Karuk tribe in the Klamath River region. That's about 4 hours north of here. And some of their specific objectives are they want to fund cultural burning. As mentioned in the video, this knowledge is embedded in their way of life and in their culture. And it's really something that requires some resources, both for permitting and for all of the processes to actually put people on the ground, boots on the ground to carry out the work. Another important project that's being carried out is environmental education. This is this intergenerational transfer of knowledge to make sure that these practices aren't lost. And so we thought that this was an equally important thing to mention that our project seeks to support. And then finally, there's general stewardship that isn't necessarily burning, but deals with the health of the river and the salmon, the acorns, the hazel, and the bear grass, all of which are core to the Karuk cultural identity. And so finally, we'll just say that one part of this that, or rather the project hinges upon this trust in land stewardship and that kind of embodied knowledge that the Karuk tribe exemplifies. And one aspect of this that we were hoping to maybe explore later on is the idea of seeing that that project gets done, maybe with some kind of real-time climate metadata embedded in the NFTs. And while this didn't happen in our first launch, which we'll describe in just a little bit, we still think it's an important aspect of our project that it would be ideal if these art pieces could kind of change over time as the health of the land increased. Maybe the NFT would reflect such changes. But with that, you can probably head to the next slide. Now, lastly, we'll flesh out a few technical details, which is that we thought about what would it look like for us to implement the blockchain side of things. And we were actually lucky enough to partner with an organization called the Impact Collective. And they work with the technical side of things of minting NFTs securely. And it happened to be a really wonderful connection point. And so on the left, you can kind of see where you're actually able to purchase and view these NFTs currently. We'll talk about those pieces more soon because I'm imagining folks are curious to see them. The other quick mention that's important here is there are environmental concerns with the use of blockchain technologies or NFTs. An important transition occurred back in September of 2022 from something called proof of work, which is the really environmentally exhaustive process for blockchain, towards something called proof of stake. And without going into too much detail, I'll just say that this was a comforting factor as we knew that our NFTs would be minted with proof of stake. The last component of this, and then I think it's time to discuss our event, is how do we deploy this? There are different communities that are excited about NFTs, distinct from maybe our campus communities. Some of these include reaching out through Discord, which is a messaging platform, Twitter, Instagram. We think that Bay Area and California residents are really excited about putting their support behind something that is hard to control. We can often feel really helpless in the wildfire crisis. And so this kind of puts power in the hands of residents who might not know how to help with the wildfire crisis other than to trust that the work will get done through maybe buying one of these NFTs. That we can probably turn over to the event, Julie. Thanks. Oh, I think you might be muted.
Thanks, appreciate that. Yeah, so then with kind of all this infrastructure in place, we launched the site, launched the sale of the art, and also hosted an educational event on February 3rd, which was a Friday. We had this really wonderful event out at the Stanford Farm. The Tomcat Foundation supported us buying some zerines and pizza, and we got about 100 students out to talk about, similar to what we've talked about today, discuss the history of fire in California's landscapes, explore what the Karuk Department of Natural Resources is doing on the ground. We played that same video as well as a virtual panel with our artist, Vicki Preston, who's a Karuk artist and also cultural burn practitioner. And it was this really beautiful moment of community coming together, listening, and supporting Indigenous leadership from the Stanford community towards work that's happening on the ground. As we've kind of been trying to do a little bit here, our main goal was really to platform Karuk leadership and Native voices. And so we did a little bit of like discussions in the group. We listened to these videos, and then we kind of opened the floor also to Stanford students and folks who wanted to share their own experience growing up with fire or relating to fire in another way. So here's some photos from the event. The Stanford Farm, if you haven't gotten a chance to visit it yet, is a beautiful space, especially at sunset. And so it kind of hosted this really nice moment of coming together. As you can see in this this bigger photo, we had that art pieces posted up on the wall for people to like take a look at. And Vicky wrote out these beautiful kind of paragraph long descriptions of the inspiration for the art and the storytelling behind it. And here's Vicky. This is a little clip from the panel that she recorded. There's two other folks speaking on it, just sharing the inspiration behind her artwork. And we were able to share this live, recorded at the event, which was really nice.
So I think here we're going to transition to a little bit of showcasing of the art. A lot of the meaning / the bullet points that we're about to spew off are really not our own words. We want to really say that like these came from Vicky and are an important context builder as you kind of take in this art. And in case you feel really inspired, like we're lucky enough to have some extra posters and stickers and NFTs to really just spread the word. So if you're into throwing one of these stickers on your water bottle, that's kind of the point, because we think it's a great conversation starter and it spreads the story. So this first one is called Basket Weaver Burning. And it really was to celebrate the inaugural Karuk Indigenous Women's Training Exchange, which is a training program to build up more fire professional experience. And so this was the first event of its kind. It took place in September of last fall. And it was this nexus of intersectional like cultural identities with being an artist, because Vicky was one of the teachers and also teaching how to cultural burn. But moreover, it honors the connection that Karuk women have with fire. As Tuli had mentioned, hazel and bear grass are crucial for the process of basket weaving. And so if you'll notice, the pattern around the top is a Karuk basket woven pattern. And most of all, I think what was cool about Vicky's framing of this piece is the idea of creating a safe space for intergenerational learning. The idea that these are not the last burners, it's this generational practice that will be carried on. So really, this is one of my favorites for sure. Now we can take a look at another one.
So this was another piece Vicky made called Salmon Bring Life. I really like this one a lot. Salmon is a really important staple food and also like spiritual symbol for Karuk people. The cycle of the salmon is actually deeply interwoven with fire, because the low temperature smoke over the river creates optimal spawning conditions, and it can keep the river insulated and cool. And Karuk folk traditionally have depended on salmon. Obviously, salmon runs are under threat. They're kind of drying up. And you might have heard the Karuk tribe has been a key leader in undamming the Klamath. And it just goes to show, I think the salmon are a great example of how these large scale conservation issues like undamming the salmon are actually intrinsically linked to our fire practices as well. But so Vicky made this piece to kind of show the role of the salmon in the river to Karuk people, which are both made healthier through fire. And the description is life cycle of a salmon with the river and the mountains in the background, sugar pine tree and pine cones in the right.
Awesome. The last one that we'll talk about in more detail is called The Role of the Turtle. And this is because the Western pond turtle is a symbol of ecosystem health in Karuk culture. Vicky kindly shared with us this really special story that the turtle is thought to ascend these really steep slopes and climb its way all the way to the top and then carry fire down back for the people and the rest of the ecosystem. And this idea is like honoring kind of a fire carrier and traveler across both water and land, which is the entire Klamath ecosystem. And so it wraps up a lot in a single art piece where we're able to see the Karuk like tribal landscape of the Klamath River running through the turtle as it carries a log with a bit of flame on it at the end. Now, these last two pieces, we don't have a ton of time to describe, but we thought we'd show them anyway, just because they're really special. These were some of Vicky's earlier works, and there's so much to pick apart within them. And so we're happy to distribute them after our talk, but thought we'd platform them here too.
So all of this is kind of just a brief, like, tip of the iceberg for the amazing work that the Creek Tribe Department of Natural Resources does on a daily basis. They're running an eco-cultural revitalization fund, which our poster and art sales on the 3rd we're in service of. But if you all would like to buy NFTs, posters, stickers, or donate directly, though 100% of sticker and poster and NFT sales also go to the fund. Please follow up. Our emails are here. If you want to just chit chat about what we've learned in this space, how to get involved, how to support Indigenous leadership, and any other kind of insight Eric and I can provide to the best of our abilities, that would really excite us. I would be so happy to wrap up this call to see an email in the inbox. I think this is what it's all about, just getting people who are excited about land back, returning fire to the landscape, building wildfire resilience, and supporting people and culture and community in the process. It's a powerful combination, and as much as we can work together, I think that's the point of all these conversations. So let's do it. Eric, any other final thoughts, or is there another slide?
Just a few slides for acknowledgements, because we want to thank,
yes,
these are
true.
4 of our crucial partners with the Karuk tribe: Vicky Preston, who you've met a little through her art and through her words in the video as well. Neva Gibbons, Connor McGuigan, and Bill Tripp been like instrumental. We truly could not have done this without them, and we're excited to have built kind of long-term friendships with them along the way too. And on the last slide, just a huge thanks to the 2 classes that really shaped our mentorship for this project. I feel like this was something that Tuli and I were working across many different dimensions of fire, and it's policy and it's research, but it's also partnership work and it's environmental justice all wrapped up in one. And so thank you to Derek, and thank you to the Hacking for Climate and Sustainability teaching team, the Tomcat Foundation, and the Will Nash Memorial Fund for their help. Yeah, would love to take any questions that you all might have.
I'd also just like to mention, so we got a little bit of money from the Will Nash Memorial Fund to pay Vicky, the artist, to do this art, pay some other folks just kind of for like design services. And they're running another round of applications. It's this awesome just grant model funding for student entrepreneurs. So if anyone is looking for a couple $1,000s to do a fun social impact or environmental impact project, shoot us an email and we'll connect you with the person who runs that, because they are actively looking for applicants.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tuli and Eric. That was just a great presentation. And as you know, I think the stuff you guys have been doing is amazing. And I got to talk to people at the new school too. I think we should really be promoting what you've done, because this is really what the New Door School should be all about. I mean, this is one element at least of it. So I'll open the floor to questions. Do people have any questions or comments they'd like to share or ask of Eric and Tuli?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Lawrence Gamble. I'm a property manager in Northern California. I have a cattle ranch and a farm. Prescribed burning used to be part of our annual routine 30 years ago. Now it's much more restricted. What would you say is the best way to communicate to both the public and our political partners that this is a practice that we need to reinvigorate, perhaps balance it with the air quality control issues?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a great question, and definitely one we were trying to figure out a lot at the start of this project, because it's a tricky one. Eric, do you have any first impressions? Because I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, one thing I'll mention is every player / stakeholder that we spoke with had a different challenge. And I think it felt really compelling to just listen to folks' challenges and needs. And so if it's CAL FIRE, you tend to find that many of the burners know what they're doing, but there needs to be maybe like higher leadership endorsement and support. So one of the big levers for change there was kind of the ideological one. Meanwhile, for communities, it actually happens to be a little bit more the comfort with actually carrying out a burn and seeing what they look like to maybe assuage some of those fears. And so something that we learned about was the really grassroots organization of prescribed burn associations, and this model of bringing the community on board for a burn and really illustrating like, what does that look like? What are the the important logistical steps you have to take for both permitting and to just ensure that like there are no biological or archaeological assets at stake there. All of these steps are very intentional. And I think there might be a little bit of a myth or a misconception behind beneficial fire just being this haphazard tool that's applied. I definitely feel for the folks who fear that a prescribed burn can run away. In fact, we had one in Santa Cruz last year, and we were speaking with one of the team leaders of that burn. And that happens to be like a big regret. And it's very, very hard to, I think, stomach that prescribed burns can run away, but the statistics don't lie that it's not super typical. And so we think that it's not just saying that to folks, it's communicating the practice of prescribed burning in its entirety, in like the very intentional steps leading up, and then seeing that it's carried out in this very controlled manner. I hope that like got started at the answer for this really good question, but maybe Tuli, if you have anything to add, please do.
I think that about captures it. I think, yeah, it's just important to remember so many people maybe traumatized by experience with fire, and also just so unaware that fire can be healthy and safe. And so baby steps seem to go a long way. We talked to people who had a lot of success, like doing pile burns, you know, bringing it into like kind of their social conversations and dialogue, and slowly just building up the place of fire in their communities and their land management. But for sure, it's a changing cultural opinion, and politics are like two big feats. So it's a hard one.
Agreed. Thank you for studying the matter, and it's really encouraging to see Stanford students finding practical solutions.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the question. Other questions?
Hi, yes, I have one. My name is Bethany, and I work for the Climate and Wildfire Institute and also run a nonprofit called the American Wildfire Experience. And thank you so much for this presentation. And this project is really special. I think, you know, being able to tie practice and arts and policy and all of the pieces together, it's just really wonderful. So my question is really to what you see as the fundraising potential for projects like this, and also sort of the mechanics of fully leveraging that potential. I'm a total I'm a total rookie when it comes to this, and so it may be simple, it may be complex. I'm just kind of curious to hear your insights and kind of approach that you would take for nonprofits to capitalize on this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off and then can turn it over to Tuli. I'd say this is something that we're still shaping our learnings from, because we are in the process of kind of launching the NFTs. Something that I'll mention is there's this high cultural tension around like how our NFTs sold. And so it typically is this big lead up, and then there's something called a drop. And so this is something that we didn't exactly have the resources to release, the idea of like a huge buildup and then a single point where everybody knows about it. But one big important deployment channel is, I'd say, Discord, Twitter, and Instagram. As silly as it sounds, these social media platforms are really how to reach a different type of NFT buyer, or in our case, like a fundraising source. And so what that might look like is just saying, well, we're not looking to have a big fundraising gala. Instead, there might be folks around the globe who can actually purchase an NFT and want to put their support behind a space like this. And so we'll say that that's the novel part of it. We'd really love to see if like nonprofits and tribal partners, like without our help, even can look to this and say, wow, this is a model that could work, and just add it into their artillery for fundraising mechanisms. So in those ways, it feels like we're all learning how to do it best. And Tuli and I are still trying to see like what is the actual impact and scale. There are some NFT projects that, yeah, they'll sell a single piece for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but other NFT prices are between like $20 and $50. So really a big range there. And I think there might be more detail added to this once we're kind of done with our first launch. Tuli, would love to hear from you too.
Yeah, I would also say our expectation for fundraising potential has shifted a lot over the course of the project, because NFTs kind of rose and fell pretty quick in terms of public value. I think when we were doing this project last winter and spring, if you can remember, like people were buying those monkeys or whatever, Bored Apes for like, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a profile picture. And we're like, wow, this is a powerful market to capture. Since then, it seems like the NFT like hype and excitement surrounding that space has dwindled. So I think it's something that you have to be pretty keyed into and realistic about the volatility of this space. I think Eric and I didn't necessarily have the capacity to go full force into an NFT drop and really see out the potential of something like this, which would realistically require a lot more of like a Web3 focused team. And so it's interesting from our vantage point. I think we kind of wrapped up the project in communication with folks like at the Moore Foundation who have, you know, millions of dollars to dispense. And we're like, oh, that's like a lot more efficient than us trying to sell NFTs for like a fraction of that value. So all that is to say, it was fun to be innovative and creative, and I think there's value in that. And also, I think in our anecdotal experience, we kind of circled back to more conventional donation pathways as a little more reliable right now, just comparing Web3 versus like foundations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Other questions or comments? Well, I'll wrap up with a couple questions because I'm really curious. You sort of hinted at it maybe, Tule, you know, in terms of looking at the more traditional means of keeping things going. What is next, though? What is next? Do you see trying to expand this? Do you, is this a test bed using the Karuk tribe? Do you get other tribes involved? Do you take a back step, say NFTs are only a piece, but this is really going to bring awareness, and then we'll go to the Moore Foundation and Bill Melinda Gates Foundations and just get cash to infuse to tribal leaders? What do you see as the short and long-term mission moving forward? Which you've done a great job already, but what's your dream of this?
Eric, would you like to start or you want me to start?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I think our vision is still undefined to an extent. I think that Eric, my favorite actually line that Eric shared of this whole presentation was, we move at the pace of trust. And that I think cannot be like underscored enough, and also has really dictated the flow of this project. And so I think that's kind of gonna determine where the next steps go as well. I know that I think the educational value of this project has been really strong, and I think we've also been proud of like the money we've been able to raise, and also the connections we've been able to create through for the Karuk department and maybe larger donors like the Moore Foundation. But I think we've also, and Eric, correct me if you feel differently about this, but it at times feels like, okay, maybe this was an exercise to educate and like build those relationships. And I don't particularly see like my role in future replications because we don't have those relationships with other tribes. And I think the Karuk department was happy with how this went. And also Vicky as an artist was happy to contribute the art, but we don't know another artist. So it kind of is like, it feels really dependent on the relationships and us stepping in of how can we be at service to these stakeholders while also respecting our own, goals of graduating and etc. But Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll just mention how delighted I am that Bethany is on the call, and if anybody else is in like the nonprofit space or is looking towards this to see, is this a mechanism that could work? I think that that's really a bit of the proof of concept at stake here. And so, like, to me, it would be incredible if the relationships felt fitting, that we could continue to kind of move along with either more drops with the Karuk tribe or with other partners. That'd be stellar. But part of this is also packaging the method in a way of saying like, Tule and I tried this. Here's what we really loved about it. I think a few outcomes that we had no clue about last spring were really the community gathering aspect, like people just being together and sharing their relationship to fire at the event on like February 3rd. That was really powerful for me. I was pretty speechless. I just like saw all these folks connecting with either non-native allies or like native community from campus. And I just didn't know why they were there on a Friday evening. It was like 5 p.m. and really they showed up. So that is part of the beauty of this project, which is so far away from maybe the technical NFT idea. And yet I feel as though if this is a model that will work for either the Moore Foundation or a nonprofit or another tribal partner, or even in a space that's not wildfire resilience, brilliant. Like, I think that is a big next step. And so what Tuli and I think in the near term are going to do is really flesh this out, make sure that we package it in a way that like people can say, okay, here's how the Understory Collective project worked out. And here are some of the steps that another organization or tribe or nonprofit could use to kind of follow in suit. And so that, yeah, it's pretty open-ended, but we're definitely looking to see like who might grip onto this as we look for what's after graduation, which is a big mystery as well. So.
Well, thank you for that. That's really helpful insight. And I think, as you can tell by the audience, they really appreciate what you guys shared today. For those of you still on the call, I know we're a little bit over. We'll hear a little bit about that. In fact, maybe I'll have Eric and Tuli make sure you join in 2 weeks. We have Amy Christensen Cardinal, who's going to share how Native practices are trying to infuse themselves with the Canadian Forest Service. Cool. In a couple of weeks. So cool. It's not NFTs, but it might be a nice sort of reflection on how we connect with culture and history and how we get that to, the government involved. So I hope people will join us for that in a couple of weeks. Next week, we have someone from Portland Gas and Electric. So a different spin on wildfires, but I hope you'll enjoy hearing his perspective. Thanks again, Tuli and Eric. You guys are awesome. You guys have an awesome presentation. We look forward to seeing what you come up with in the weeks ahead. Okay, take care, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks so much, Derek.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Bye.